The Adventures of Old Mr. Toad. Chapter 4. Peter Rabbit Finds Old Mr. Toad. It isn't often that Peter Rabbit is truly envious, but sometimes in the joyousness of spring he is. He envies the birds because they can pour out in beautiful song the joy that is in them. The only way he can express his feelings is by kicking his long heels, jumping about, and such foolish things. While that gives Peter a great deal of satisfaction, it doesn't add to the joy of other people as do the songs of the birds. And you know, to give joy to others is to add to your own joy. So there are a few times when Peter wishes he could sing. He was wishing this very thing now as he sat on the bank of the Smiling Pool, listening to the great spring chorus. Tra-la-la-lee, oka-chee, oka-chee, there's joy in the spring for you and for me, sang Redwing the Blackbird from the bulrushes. From over in the green meadows rose the clear lilt of Carol the meadowlark, and among the alders, just where the Laughing Brook ran into the Smiling Pool, a flood of happiness was pouring from the throat of little friend the song sparrow. Winsome bluebird's sweet, almost plaintive whistle seemed to fairly float in the air, so that it was hard to say just where it did come from. And in the top of the big hickory tree, Welcome Robin was singing as if his heart were bursting with joy. Even Sammy Jay was adding a beautiful bell-like note instead of his usual harsh scream. As for the Smiling Pool, it seemed as if the very water itself sang, for a mighty chorus of clear piping voices from unseen singers rose from all around its banks. Peter knew who these singers were, although look as he would, he could see none of them. They were Hylas, the tiny cousins of Sticky Toes, the tree toad. Listening to all these joyous voices, Peter forgot for a time what had brought him to the Smiling Pool. But Jimmy Skunk and Uncle Billy Possum didn't forget. They were still hunting for old Mr. Toad. "Well, old Mr. Dreamer, have you found him yet?" asked Jimmy Skunk, stealing up behind Peter and poking him in the back. Peter came to himself with a start. "No," said he. "I was just listening and wishing that I could sing too. Don't you ever wish you could sing, Jimmy?" "No," replied Jimmy. "I never wasted time wishing I could do things it was never meant I should do. It's funny where old Mr. Toad is. He said that he was coming down here to sing, and Redwing the Blackbird seemed to be expecting him. I've looked everywhere I can think of without finding him, but I don't believe in giving up without another try. Stop your dreaming and come help us hunt." So Peter stopped his dreaming and joined in the search. Now there was one place where neither Peter nor Jimmy nor Uncle Billy had thought of looking. That was in the Smiling Pool itself. They just took it for granted that old Mr. Toad was somewhere on the bank. Presently Peter came to a place where the bank was very low and the water was shallow for quite a little distance out in the Smiling Pool. From out of that shallow water came the piping voice of a Hala, and Peter stopped to stare, trying to see the tiny singer. Suddenly, he jumped right up in the air with surprise. There was a familiar-looking head sticking out of the water. Peter had found old Mr. Toad.